Hey everyone, good morning. It is 8:30, so it is time for us to get started. And so welcome to the ISU Town Hall meeting. My name is Miles Lackey, and I am the ISU campus rep to the TIER study. Just a few comments before we officially kick things off. The presentation today will last about an hour, and will focus on the business cases recently presented to the Board of Regents week before last. After the presentation, we will open up the floor to questions, and we have a couple of microphones on each side of the room here, and we'll also be taking questions that are submitted online for those of you, or for those that are going to be watching remotely. I will now introduce Rick Ferraro. Rick is the TIER Program Director for Deloitte, and he will be leading us off. Rick?
I'm not even going to stand up, but thank you for having us here at campus. We want to have a lively discussion. We will try to speed through the description of these as we can to leave as much time for discussion. This session is a touch shorter than the other campuses due to just scheduling constraints. So with that, I'll participate in Q&A, but I'll turn it over to Virginia Frazier, who will have some prepared remarks.
Thanks, Rick, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. I am Virginia Frazier. I'm the project manager for the TIER project, and I'm going to start things off by orienting you to the materials in today's presentation. But before I do that, I do want to thank you again for having us, and also for all of the faculty, staff, and students who've had inputs into the documents that we're going to be going over today. We truly appreciate the time you've spent with us and all the hard work that you do every day. You'll notice that the document that was posted online is more than 140 pages, and it's quite dense. The materials are quite rich in text, so as we go through the material today, we have excerpts from that document, but we're not going to cover every page, and even the pages we do cover, we're not going to cover all the details on every page. But we do want to orient you so that you get the key highlights. But we do encourage you to go out, read that document thoroughly, and look at the important details that are contained in that document that we're going to be highlighting today. Also, I wanted to give a quick overview of the timeline. So after these materials are discussed today, this is the last of our town halls at the three universities, and after having presented to the board about a week and a half ago, there will then be more than a month before the regents vote on these business cases. So during that period of time, we encourage you to provide feedback and input to your campus reps, and also through the website for TIER here at Iowa State, because that feedback is going to be collected, and each president from each university is going to be presenting their input and feedback as representing their campus viewpoint during a board meeting that's on October 22nd and 23rd. So we highly encourage you to provide that input and feedback. You have several weeks to do that, and then the board is not voting, as I said, until mid-November. As we walk through the materials today, there are three important points that I'd like you to remember about these materials. And the first is that these business cases are still estimates, so they should not be considered precise or 100% accurate at this point in time. This is the next level down in the analysis from the original analysis, the list of opportunities that we presented in phase 1 of the project. Now we're in phase 2, and this analysis should be used as a key input to inform decision making. The second thing I'd like you to remember is that although not precise, we're confident that this is the right level of analysis to inform the board's decision-making process. The board's considering transformational change, and they need solid analysis as they consider that change. But there is no recipe to follow, because transformation does require some venturing into the unknown. But this analysis does represent our best estimates of potential savings and effectiveness improvements using available data analyzed within a limited time frame, supplemented by assumptions that we have discussed and tested with constituents at each campus. We conducted hundreds of interviews across all three institutions, we reviewed volumes of university-wide data, including financial data, policies, human resources data, and systems data. We met with campus leadership to review and discuss observations and assumptions. But even with all of that, this analysis is not exhaustive. And yet it doesn't need to be, because it provides enough directional perspective to inform the decision-making process. And the third thing that I'd like you to remember is that we do expect these estimates to change as any of these areas move into implementation and as detailed design would proceed. Some estimates would go up, but many could go down. Estimates of potential savings should be tracked and reported as new baselines should be established, as more information is obtained, and as details are fleshed out. And this is a natural and expected part of the process when you move from estimates to establish the viability of a potential opportunity into actual implementation of that opportunity. So we do expect that the estimates will change. There are four main areas that we're going to be focused on today: finance, human resources, information technology, and facilities. And we're going to be presenting 8 business cases in these areas. These are the remaining administrative business cases from the original 12 administrative areas that were selected by the board for further analysis. These areas were analyzed to create business cases and potential new operating models, and then were summarized into an implementation roadmap. Additionally, potential implementation activities and timelines were suggested for consideration. And the board may decide at its discretion which initiatives to pursue, the implementation timing, and the implementation approach. I'm going to walk through some additional context for you as we start to proceed with the business case areas. A couple key points. One is that the Phase 2 analysis focused on quantifying potential investment costs and savings associated with each chosen opportunity from Phase 1. Quantifying these potential investment costs and savings is complex, as I just discussed, but we are going to be presenting those outputs today. Also, as outlined on the 4th bullet of this slide, and these slides are available online, these are all part of the original document that's posted, so you're welcome to take a closer look at this, because I know it's a little hard to read. But as outlined on the 4th bullet of this slide, in some of the Phase 2 business cases, potential changes to the way that work is performed and the way that technology is used and the way that processes could change could affect the organizational structure and staffing levels at individual universities. For instance, as processes are simplified or as technology is further used to support transactions, the staffing needed to support different kinds of work may be reduced. But in these cases, it's important to note that there are many ways to realize these staffing changes, and the way that we've modeled these use natural attrition and phased retirements. We realize this is a very sensitive subject, and in any of these business cases, if they proceed into implementation, the decision about how to handle any staffing changes would be made by the board working very closely with the universities. Again, we realize this is quite sensitive, but we did want to make you aware of this facet of some of the business cases as we go through these materials today so that you can feel free to ask questions. As I briefly mentioned, there are 3 main outputs from Phase 2 that we're going to cover in today's meeting. The first is the business cases, which is the analysis of the proposed opportunity to help facilitate the decision on whether the projects should be undertaken and move into implementation. The second is an operating model, and this represents how the universities operate currently and any proposed changes in the future based on the business case changes. Categories of the operating model include governance, people, process, technology, structure, and performance management. And then finally, we have the implementation roadmap and action plan, which is a summary of how the opportunities could be implemented over time, along with a list of potential actions. Some of these opportunities could be implemented by the universities themselves, while others could require outside support. For example, areas that require deep expertise to implement or when internal capacity is not available. And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we go through the implementation roadmap. While the Phase 2 components I just described will provide important information for today's discussion, it's key to note that Phase 2 does not contain detailed implementation information. We have the basis for what implementation areas or different activities are needed to support these different areas, but it doesn't contain detailed design. And the way I think about it is that Phase 2 outputs describe the what of estimated investment costs and potential savings and potential anticipated benefits, but it does not include the detail of the how, because that's something that's unique and created working hand in hand with each university, working directly with people who do the work every day and collaborating on how to design the future. So the how's the planning and the design, the go live, the piloting, and the continuous improvement of these opportunity areas. And for any of these areas that would move forward, there's still a lot of work to be done to start to craft the how. As we go through the business cases today, it's going to be very tempting to want to detail that how now to get a better understanding of how these pieces fit together. But as I said, there are many implementation activities that would need to occur. So you'd need to develop a detailed implementation plan. You'd have to have working groups with faculty, staff, and students to develop streamlined processes and to identify technology impacts and changes. You'd need to identify key performance indicators and metrics and ways that you could measure the success of these different implementation areas so that you could also make tweaks or changes going forward for areas that weren't meeting expectations to make sure that you're getting the results that you're after. You would have to look at organizational structure to look at ways of redesigning that and how to update job descriptions for new or changed positions. And you would need to be supported by intensive communications and organizational support so that the university is ready and equipped for this type of change in any of these implementation areas. So as you can see, with all of these types of activities that would need to follow, Phase 2 represents just the next layer down of analysis, but is really just the beginning of what could be a transformational effort for the universities. And finally, a couple considerations before we move into the business cases. As the board decides which areas to pursue for implementation, there are a few factors to consider which could affect the costs and timeline to implement these opportunities, and also affect the way that implementation would be sequenced. The first, and maybe the most important, is to really get a good understanding of the amount of change the universities and the board can absorb. Transformation is filled with change, and it's something that needs to be carefully thought out and planned. The number of people within the university is available to support implementation. We realize people have their day jobs and that any type of transformation effort requires a deep understanding of the capacity of each individual university. The skill sets available within the universities to lead the changes described in this document. In many cases, those skill sets are available. In some cases, it's new, and that needs to be carefully looked at. The funding available to implement business cases. Some of these do require investment, and that investment is something that we've outlined in these business cases, and we've also provided timelines of when that investment would pay off. But that funding available to implement is important. And then finally, the dependencies between opportunities. As we'll see a little bit later in the roadmap, these opportunities have dependencies with some of the other work that is proposed in this roadmap, but also there's a factor that would need to be better understood, which is the individual projects and initiatives that are underway at each campus now or planned for the future. And all of those would need to be taken into consideration as implementation planning would occur. Now I'd like to turn things over. We're going to start going through the business case areas. I am going to turn things over to Dave Noon, who is going to walk us through both the finance and the HR areas today. Thanks, Dave.
As a identifier, those in the back, there's plenty of seats here, still in front. come down and sit down.
So good morning. As Virginia mentioned, my name is Dave Noon, and I'm here today presenting several of the business cases relating to our Phase 2 analysis. The first I'll start with is finance and HR, and then later this morning after Shomik speaks about IT, I'll actually also be presenting facilities and the implementation roadmap. Regarding the finance and HR business cases, I'll obviously presenting these, but Emily Todd, who led the analysis in this area, is unable to be here this morning, so I'll be presenting on her behalf. And as a result, please ask any questions you have at the end, and happy to talk through those. So for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to start at a high level, provide an overview, and then I'll have some commentary specific to ISU that we observed during the analysis. So the finance business case analyzed ways to improve how finance transactions are processed across campus. And although each university is unique in their own way when it comes to people, process, technology, and culture, we observed that all three universities are struggling with some of the same challenges relating to finance transaction processing. What we observed is that finance transactions such as procurement requisitions, travel, account reconciliation permeate all departments and units at each of the universities. Most of the departments we found rely on ad hoc administrative support to manage transaction processing, and this can sometimes be difficult or frustrating for staff who are expected to be experts across a wide range of areas. It can also lead to a lot of back and forth and rework between departments and central finance. This is a challenge that's typical in all of higher education, and many institutions have started moving towards shared services as a way to improve how transactions are managed in these areas. As part of our analysis, we did model the impact of shared services at each university, and while the business case indicates shared service is a possibility, it's not a one-size-fits-all model, and the degree of technology, HR support, stakeholder willingness, and organizational change are all considerations, many of the things that Virginia just referenced. Before we get into the detail of the two business cases, or the two things we modeled at ISU for finance, I wanted to pause and comment on how we viewed shared services, since there are many definitions that exist at all three universities. And from our point of view, shared services differs from the centralization of services in many key ways. One is that shared service is a customer-oriented organization that's focused on service excellence, efficient service delivery, and continuous process improvement. And shared services should use as well service level agreements and performance metrics to track outputs and manage performance over time. And as I mentioned a moment ago, shared service not being a one-size-fits-all approach, we have sort of looked at a spectrum here of how shared services could be modeled. And this slide represents the spectrum from a more decentralized to a more coordinated approach. And there are many hybrid options that could fall not just in the middle here, but all across that spectrum. So in order to be consistent across the universities, we did model two options at each university, and that would be the college-based model on the left and the university-wide model on the right. And the college-based model assumes reorganizing work at each college to elevate some of the departmental transactions up to dedicated experts who receive formal training at the college level and who could then provide services across departments or units. And there are a few benefits to the college-based model, including that it's often more widely accepted by departments or units due to the smaller degree of organizational change that may be required. It also frequently has a lower implementation cost than the university-wide model, and it can sometimes be quicker to implement, and less effort is typically required to do that implementation. The challenge of that model, though, are that sometimes there are limited savings potential because it does not leverage at the full scale of the university. There's duplication of services still across colleges or units. It can limit collaboration across colleges and units as well. And when it comes to implementation, the colleges and units may lack resources to implement those changes, and some units may be smaller than would be needed to justify their own shared service staff. The next model, the one to the right again, is the university-wide model, and it provides services through a finance shared service organization to the campus as a whole. These benefits, or the benefits to this model, include increased consistency and service quality. It also maximizes efficiency by using the full scale of the university. And it minimizes the duplication of effort and provides stronger career potential for shared services staff based on the new organizational structure that's created to support the shared service. And then there are a few challenges, of course. One would be that there is more organizational change and organizational design required to build that new solution. Also, there's more upfront investment required to redesign processes and develop supporting technologies that would be needed. And Before I talk and move into the two slides we have that summarize some of the service improvements and savings, I want to talk a little bit about how we conducted this analysis during this phase. And we followed essentially 3 steps when we were conducting this analysis. The first was understanding the current environment and developing a current state baseline level of effort. So we conducted interviews, reviewed data and technology systems to understand the current environment at each university. We then reviewed the HR data file for each university and made assumptions about how much effort staff are currently spending on key process areas. The process areas we looked at for finance included travel and expense, accounts payable, procurement, accounting, and customer service support, all related to finance transactions. We then conducted interviews, reviewed job descriptions, and used our knowledge of similarly sized organizations to develop a baseline of the current state effort in this area. We then validated this information and assumptions with stakeholders on campus. So then the next primary step we took was establishing the potential to restructure work and reduce the level of effort potentially in the future. So during this step, we looked at potential process, policy, technology, training, and role changes that could be made to help reduce that current state effort in the future. And then the third step finally was quantifying the number of shared service staff and level of effort that might be needed in the future. And to do this, we reviewed volumetric data, such as how many travel and expense vouchers do you process, what number of purchase orders do you process, those types of things. And then to help determine the future state staffing that was forecasted in these business cases, we also used our understanding of finance best practices, as well as benchmarks to develop those estimates and determine the financial impact. These estimates were developed at the university level, so that means that from the baseline of our analysis, while not 100% inaccurate, as Virginia alluded to, it does serve as an indicator as whether or not this is an opportunity to change the level of effort required and restructure work. These estimates that we'll share need to be confirmed during implementation, and a more detailed understanding of departmental nuances can be developed at that time. During implementation, a resource allocation analysis will also be conducted, which is a department-by-department review of workload to understand the way transactions are processed more effectively. And since this effort is spread across numerous people across campus, careful planning that evaluates the current departmental workload will be required to realize the forecasted savings and improve the quality of service. Okay. So now we'll get into some of the ISU specific information. And first I'll mention that we did see many strengths at ISU. The recent implementation of Quality Financials has gone a long way in automating key financial processes. ISU has also been proactive in establishing a fiscal accountability committee to address process, policy, and financial issues across campus. And we also saw that there's an understanding of cost and revenue drivers that's largely attributable to the resource management model. And with all that being said, we do still think there's an opportunity for shared services at ISU. While each unit at ISU has dedicated budget, accounting, and accounting staff, most departments still rely heavily on administrative staff to support financial processes. This jack-of-all-trades model sometimes leaves staff feeling overwhelmed by the number of processes and policies they need to be proficient in, and departmental staff do not always have peers to rely on for consultation or support during normal absences from work, and this can sometimes create delays in service. It also creates challenges for central administration, who are required to train a large number of staff on procedures and technology, and this challenge was exhibited during the recent implementation of the Quality Financials tool. We also saw a wide variety in service delivery approach, as well as departmental satisfaction with financial services. Some departments feel they have the right number and type of staff who provide good service, while other departments reported they do not have the right staffing levels or roles to support finance-related services. Given these challenges, we think the opportunity exists for shared services in key areas such as travel and expense, procurement, accounting, and accounts payable. And for example, instead of relying on numerous administrative personnel to support travel and expense in each department, services could be performed by people who specialize in these areas or could provide service across a wider range of departments. Shared services could also better align skills with roles and responsibilities and provide staff with additional training opportunities. Establishing service level agreements between the shared service to clarify service delivery expectations, for example, the types of transactions processed and turnaround times, will also be important so that performance can be measured and tracked and improved over time. Shared services would also help to reduce the administrative effort at the department level, freeing up staff time for mission-critical activities related to teaching and research. And shared services could help to reduce transaction processing time and error rates by increasing consistency of processes and roles, as well as providing greater opportunities for staff to build those skills. I'll briefly touch on some of the financial impacts of each model. So the first one is actually the college-based model, and it's on the bottom of the slide you can see that steady state savings are approximately 1.7 million, and this would represent a net impact to 23 FTEs is what's forecasted in the future state, which would all be realized through natural attrition over time. The university-wide model that we talked through as well has higher steady state savings, and those are estimated to be approximately $3 million. They're forecasted at about 2.9 million at steady state, and that would be a net reduction of approximately 50 FTEs over time. And the new staffing levels would be realized through natural attrition and potentially through the use of phased retirement. So in summary, these finance opportunities, we feel that shared services is an option or an opportunity for the university to implement, and it could improve consistency of service and also reduce cost. So I'll move on to HR before we will then transition to information technology. The human resources business case evaluated ways to improve the decentralized HR service delivery model across the university. While the HR analysis is similar to finance in many ways, it is different in certain areas. First of all, the decentralized activities reviewed as part of this business case included both transactional and some of the more strategic HR services that are provided to staff. For example, not only did we evaluate the level of effort around personnel transaction forms, but we also reviewed the effort relating to things like benefits consultation, recruitment services, HR data management, training, performance management, and immigration support. And unlike the finance business case, each university has a very different HR structure and is facing different challenges in the areas of HR services. That's one thing we saw clearly when we did the analysis, is there were some differences at UNI and ISU and the University of Iowa. Let's see. We conducted interviews to support this analysis and reviewed processes and policies and job descriptions that allowed us to understand the current state environment at each university, and we also used our knowledge of best practices, benchmarks, and input from university stakeholders to suggest potential changes that could enable more consistent and efficient services. At ISU, we saw several strengths in HR, including a commitment by staff to meet service needs locally, even if it means developing new methods or going above and beyond expectations. However, we did see some challenges at ISU that could be addressed to deliver more efficient and comprehensive HR services. The biggest issue that is facing ISU relates to technology. The dated legacy HR information system has limited automation, accessibility, and reporting capabilities, which increases time spent on HR at a lot of different levels. And this includes transactions and data management activities. And we also spoke with multiple departments who reported hiring additional staff to manage the offline spreadsheets and database to help facilitate data management and reporting that would typically be done through an HR information system. Due to these technology limitations, HR is very transaction-driven, leading to strategic service gaps in areas like workforce planning, recruiting, classification and compensation, and training and development. While central HR provides core HR services, they seem to be underinvested in key areas like classification and compensation and recruiting. And for example, we heard from many staff across campus that they are sometimes spending time conducting their own compensation studies because of gaps in information that sometimes comes from central HR. There's also, within the university, an HR service center that processes new hire paperwork and personnel action forms. However, the service center is limited by a lack of technology as well, and it does not actively track some of the performance metrics that could be desired. And because of this, people sometimes opt to bypass the service center due to the variability in levels of services provided. And each college and unit, from an organizational perspective, does have HR liaisons, which are local HR support that report through the colleges. And the liaisons are sometimes full-time dedicated staff or sometimes part-time that perform HR services and other administrative duties. And we heard that services provided by HR liaisons are often inconsistent across the university, depending on which unit or college you're working with. So because of that, some departments feel they have dedicated HR staff that can support their needs, while others feel they don't have enough of the right kind of resources to support all of their HR efforts. Lack of a direct reporting relationship between the liaisons and central HR also can contribute to some of the variation in service and expectations across campus for these roles. And in addition to HR liaisons, there are many other administrative staff and HR-related tasks and services like recruitment and data management. So given these challenges, there are a few key future state considerations for ISU. First would be investing in a comprehensive human resources information system to support core HR functions and to allow for better access to data. It will be critical to helping ISU become more efficient in the longer term. Opportunity also exists to enhance the current HR Service Center by expanding services and capability through increasing and clarifying service offerings and investing in technology. One example could be a constituent management system to help manage the contact when people do reach out to the HR Service Center. The HR Service Center could also provide additional services to campus, such as sort of answering HR customer service inquiries, sometimes called Tier 1 inquiries, facilitating reporting and metrics gathering, and providing recruitment administrative support for things like posting a job or validating minimum job requirements. The opportunity also exists to convert some of the HR positions, liaison positions, to full-time business partners to allow for the specialization of services and create a more unified HR organization. This would mean that the local HR staff would be full-time dedicated HR specialists who would be university employees and report to central HR, although they still maintain a very close connection and understanding of the departments and units that they serve. The revised business partner role could serve more than one unit depending on workload and overall scale. So I'll briefly touch on, for this business case, the financial implications. We did model two options here as well. One was looking at the impact of an HR information system and the other is without. The first model with the HRIS, obviously this would require a significant investment in technology. And in this model, steady state savings are estimated to be approximately 2.1 million with a net change of about 49 FTEs over time. And again, the same approach would be used as we discussed earlier to get to those new levels. And then the other option would be without a new HR information systems, the efficiencies would not be as high, and steady state annual savings are estimated to be about 800,000 annually in this case, with a net impact of about 16 people over time. So with that, as a quick tour through finance and HR, we can come back for questions in a little while, but I'll turn it over to Shomik Saha, who will discuss information technology.
Thank you, Dave. My name is Shomik Saha, and I led the analysis on the information technology business cases. And it's certainly my pleasure today to provide an overview of those four IT business cases. To be very clear, the basis for the work on these IT business cases and all the business cases was the data that we captured from each university, including ISU, which was then used for the team's discussions. And that culminated in a number of focused working sessions so that we could validate key metrics and better understand the IT landscape. As we reviewed the IT landscape across ISU in particular, we clearly recognized a number of strengths and leading practices in use across the ISU IT landscape. For instance, the robust data centers on the ISU campus, complemented by the high-speed Boreas optical network, and the successful introduction of technology innovations like voice over IP and virtual desktop infrastructure within the university, as well as what we say are the strong application development and maintenance skill sets on the Java enterprise platform. Therefore, some of the business cases that we have developed here seek to build on top of these leading practices. And while I will reference a few of the slides in this presentation, we are happy to answer questions about all of the content at the end of this presentation as well. Within IT, the four business cases address various aspects of the technology function. While these business cases can be implemented independently of each other, there is a more favorable sequencing of these business cases that we think can enable the succeeding business cases to build on the success of the previous business case. Therefore, we will first review IT04 and IT03, the first two rows on the slide, which deal with the use of technology innovations and the simplification of the application landscape, which could potentially lower the cost of technology over the long run. Then we will discuss IT02 and IT01, which focus on unlocking efficiencies within the IT service delivery model. Those two business cases are the third and fourth rows on the slide. So the first business case that we will discuss, IT04, has two separate components within it, namely the first one that we call the Desktop Transformation Initiative, and the second one that we call the Print Green Transformation. So I'll talk about both of those in detail. The first initiative, the Desktop Transformation Initiative, essentially seeks to extend the virtual desktop infrastructure to serve a proportion of existing desktop users whose machines are at end of life. These machines could be replaced by thin client devices which are supported by appropriate server and storage infrastructure in the back end. And some of you at ISU already use some of these devices as well. But just to define it, a thin client device is a small, lightweight device, much smaller than a desktop device, that works just like any other computer, but with one key difference. Most of the data is stored within the back-end VDI server and not on the thin client. Because these thin client devices generally don't have hard drives, their lifespan is longer than typical desktop computers. Thus, they only need to be replaced once every 6 or 7 years. Plus, it is generally easier to replace these malfunctioning or aged thin clients because as the data is on the server, all you need to do is basically replace the hardware unit at the front end. They also reduce electrical consumption by about 50 to 70%, saving extra money in utilities. So for ISU, we identified about 13,000 plus existing desktop devices used that were not thin client devices currently. And we estimate that some proportion, not all of them, some proportion of them could potentially be supported using this technology over the next 4 years or so. Typically, these are computers that will be found in, say, conference rooms or labs or used in checkout systems, as well as used for more standard purposes like, say, accessing Microsoft Office, internet browsing, usage of Java clients, instant messaging, email, Adobe readers, and for accessing, say, custom developed software. But we don't really expect advanced or power users who use software like AutoCAD, for example, to be able to use these systems. Even though it is technically possible to do that, financially it does not turn out to be attractive. Additionally, this can open up some options for device innovation. For instance, some students may prefer to access desktops for their classes using their laptops within either the computer labs or perhaps even anywhere from campus. While this potential reduction in desktop computers is not factored into this business case, this could be something to consider for the future as well, in terms of both providing convenience and enabling some efficiencies at the same time too. In terms of cost estimation for the VDI opportunity, this is well in line with the existing infrastructure costs that have been incurred by ISU in setting up the foundational VDI infrastructure. So that's the first initiative. The second initiative that we're talking about consists of potential activities to seek to reduce printer, paper, and toner cost over the next 2 to 3 years that we call collectively the Print Green initiative. A couple of steps potentially within that initiative could incrementally increase the amount of duplex printing that is done across the campus, which currently ranges approximately around 50% for ISU, and which could potentially be nudged higher towards 80 or 90% through user education and training, like, for example, propagating more how to print duplex videos for users, as well as by using technology features on printers like defaulting to duplex printing, and using software like, say, PaperCut to measure more of the printer usage. The savings from that paper alone could be upwards of $100,000, and that could potentially increase as we have used conservative estimates of paper. The second effort within PrintGreen is to incrementally encourage the migration of print services from local printers to network printers. Now, these network printers are usually more cost-effective in terms of printing costs, and provide a lot more capabilities. Like they print much faster, they print duplex typically, they can bind, they have privacy options like they can store and print as well. We saw that there were over 1,600 plus local printers on campus, and what we see is that if some of these users can migrate their printing to network printers over the next 2 to 3 years, the university can save significantly in the cost of equipment, paper, toner, and other supplies as well. Obviously, what that means is that we do need to look at the positioning, locationing of network printers. We need to see if we need to increase some of the network printers in some areas as well in order to be able to get some of the printing migration to happen. Therefore, these two key initiatives form the crux of this business case. And while we estimate that this could unlock savings between $3 and $4 million across the 3 universities, for ISU, we estimate steady state savings between $1.6 and $2.0 million with a payback period of approximately a year or so. So that's the first business case. The next business case that we will review focuses on the different applications and the systems that support the various business processes across the 3 universities. What we found was that prior to the work in phase 2, while there was quite a bit of inventory of applications, there wasn't quite an integrated inventory of applications and systems across the 3 universities. Therefore, discussions and working sessions were conducted to gather and collate this information related to the different applications and systems used across the 3 universities and within ISU as well. So we totaled to about 700 key applications and systems with about 350 for ISU. Now, while this still potentially represents a portion of the total applications and the systems that are used across the 3 universities, it provided a number of directional indicators on the type of simplification opportunities available. We found that there were instances of overlapping or similar classes of applications that supported similar business needs. So for example, multiple types of technology tools like, say, desktop imaging tools, backup tools, help desk tools, ticketing tools, space management tools, different database tools, different database systems. We also saw some opportunities in enterprise functional areas like library management or financial management, where some of the tools and systems are coming to end of life, and hence provide an opportunity for some level of collaboration across the universities. This is a key point in the systems life cycle that we term as the technology inflection point, because that is a point where it is typically cheaper to make a decision to potentially collaborate together on selection processes, requirements gathering, architecture design, pilots, implementation, and potentially operations, obviously for systems where this is possible. And it is also a point where a consideration of total cost of ownership, along with the level of customization and the needed across the 3 universities, can be used to guide the decision-making process. Of course, as you will recognize, the key challenge for this activity is to provide a effective forum for effective governance on the applications landscape, across the three universities and within the universities as well. So therefore, in the future state solution, we propose the formation of a CIO council that will include key IT and functional leaders who can then help to establish a future state application strategy and roadmap across the three universities. The primary mechanism that we propose is the process of active governance, whereby as systems are up for retirement, or if there are systems where there are low costs to change, typically these are systems that are not tied to intrinsic business processes. And you think, say, backup tools, for example. If these systems can be considered for discussion, the universities can engage in some collaborative discussion to determine a more streamlined application landscape for the future. So as an initial marker, we have indicated some areas like infrastructure and operations, library management, facilities management, collaboration softwares, et cetera, as areas to start on first to potentially unlock licensing, architecture, design, and operational savings. Now, as I turn to the financials, I will headline this by saying that while the payback periods are longer in this business case, ranging from 4 to 5 years, a number of qualitative benefits will also result, including the greater use of sharing or greater ease of sharing of data and information, not only across the universities, but within the universities themselves. And for ISU in particular, we expect active governance efforts to potentially unlock savings of roughly $1.6 million at steady state with a payback period of approximately 5 years for this effort. We propose as well that some of the efforts within this initiative could also enhance business case discipline for larger applications development and maintenance projects, which over time could either increase the amount of value that's returned from these applications development projects, or they could reduce the cost of the applications development projects. So those were the first two business cases that we discussed relating to technology innovation and streamlining of the applications landscape. We will now turn our attention to the final two business cases, IT02 and IT01, which focuses on unlocking potential efficiencies within the central and the distributed IT service delivery models through using a number of levers like technology innovation and streamlining of service delivery. So taking IT02, which focuses on the central IT service delivery model, there is potential to unlock some service efficiencies because of a number of factors. One of those factors being the use of technology innovations like thin client devices and the streamlining of the printer landscape, which could change the dynamic for core technology services and potentially reduce the volume of some of this work. We also see potential for the greater use of explicit service level agreements so that performance on services can be clearly measured and in some cases can be modified so that the optimal balance of effort versus service quality can be achieved. We also see potential for considering the increase of the span of control within ITS over the longer term, as well as proposing some opportunities to potentially pool related services within the central ITS delivery model. We expect savings of roughly $500,000 for ISU with a payback of just over a year. While this could lead to a net staff impact of 5, this could be more than addressed using normal attrition. The next business case, IT01, focuses on the distributed IT service delivery model and also indicates some methods to potentially unlock efficiencies. As we reviewed the 16 different distributed teams at this university that ably provide various technology services, we found that there were some overlaps of more core infrastructure-related technology services, like, say, desktop management, server management, security management, and help desk services. These are typically capability areas where efficiencies can be gained through the adoption of technology innovation and the ongoing simplification of the applications landscape, those that were proposed in business cases IT04 and IT03. There is also a benefit in pooling some of these services together and using consistent processes, tool sets, reporting mechanisms, and service level agreements. For instance, we found multiple help desk tools today. Using a single help desk tool could provide some efficiencies today. We also found that there were 30-plus server rooms at ISU. These are basically small server rooms that contain a number of servers, where some of these server rooms and their assets could be considered for storage using the central data centers that you have on campus. So, so we see that some of these technology innovation initiatives supported by these efforts to streamline the server room computing resources could unlock efficiencies within this model. Now, it is important to emphasize that while we do suggest the next evolution of this service delivery model, we're only suggesting changes to a few capabilities within IT only, and not to many other capabilities like, say, local applications development, business requirements and business analysis, reporting, strategic planning, etc. For this initiative in particular, we expect savings of about $1.5 million for ISU with a payback of approximately a year. And while this could lead to a net future state impact of 20, this could be more than addressed using normal attrition. I will also add that as we talked to a number of teams, some teams had a number of staff that were retiring in about 1 or 2 years, and hence the efforts in this initiative could potentially also mitigate the risk for some of those organizations that they serve. So with that said, we have covered the 4 IT business cases, and we're certainly happy to answer your questions on these business cases. I will hand it back to David Noon, who will now walk us through the remaining facilities business cases, as well as the preliminary implementation roadmap.
Thank you, Shomik. So I know we're getting close to 9:30 when we want to start questions, so I'll move through these reasonably quickly, and I think that the materials are a little bit, I guess the savings are sometimes smaller, so the materials are sometimes more straightforward too, related to facilities. So let's talk through those. There are 2 business cases that were developed during this phase, and both of the business cases focus on energy management initiatives to decrease the overall demand for energy. The first of the facilities business cases we will discuss is focused on UNI, and the other business case applies to both UNI and ISU. One of the reasons that these 2 business cases were selected during this phase was because of the steady increase of energy prices over the past 10 to 15 years. If implemented, these 2 business cases could play a part in decreasing the demand for energy at the universities. And it's worth noting that both of the business cases and facilities we think could be implemented by the facilities staff at each of the universities. All right. The first facilities business case deals with reducing utility consumption by adjusting thermostats in classroom buildings during evenings and during the summer. And the savings forecasted in this business case are specific to UNI. So again, the principles may apply, but this was a UNI-specific business case. This business case identifies that classroom buildings with similar attributes and requirements can operate on a similar heating and air conditioning schedule to limit the use of energy when buildings are not being used. And our team identified this opportunity and did the analysis. However, ownership for this business case was transitioned to UNI staff in August for additional discussion and review. And it's with the input of those stakeholders that the numbers were adjusted and reflect what you see in front of you. Additionally, the UNI staff we met with feel this opportunity applies during the summer rather than during the academic year. And because of this, the opportunity is, again, focused on the summer. And the ongoing steady state savings that you see are approximately $30,000 a year just by setting back the thermostats in the summertime. So it's all utility consumption savings. The next business case was labeled FAC04, and this one applied at both ISU and UNI. When we analyzed this, we looked at what's the opportunity for implementing additional energy management initiatives, which were identified through discussions with the facilities campus, or with the facility staff here on campus. And examples of the initiatives that they helped to identify include installing or expanding the use of items such as direct digital controls, daylight controls and occupancy sensors, coil replacement, lighting fixture replacement, and failed steam trap replacement. And this initial list of initiatives could be implemented over approximately 2 years at ISU and would require about $1.8 million of investment to implement. That would reflect, I think, the time to implement as well as the actual materials that would be needed to do that. And the result from that would be about $270,000 of ongoing savings once all changes were made. And again, looking towards implementation for not just this opportunity, but the one we talked through right before it, we think that both of these could be implemented by university personnel. And we feel that both of the facilities opportunities would benefit as well from establishing a formal process to identify, prioritize, and monitor savings related to these two initiatives, but also going forward into the future. And this will help to provide a steady stream of new projects to implement over time once these are already complete. So the last item before Q&A is the implementation roadmap. Let me get on the right slide there. And during the remarks from Shomik and Virginia and me, you've heard several comments about implementation. The roadmap that we're about to walk through is intended to provide a summary of these. And it's all of those thoughts in a single spot represented graphically. And I'd like to emphasize that this slide that we'll take a look at on the next page is a starting point and is intended to begin the discussion relating to implementation, rather being the defined or the only path forward that could be followed. The university presidents, as Virginia alluded to, and representatives will be collecting your input over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be providing that back to the board regarding their point of view, regarding your point of view about these opportunities. And universities will also provide their input on if they feel an initiative can be implemented by existing personnel or if there may be a need for additional support. And as we talked about, there's a board meeting later this month to collect that feedback before a vote would take place on these opportunities and whether or not they'd be implemented in November. Okay, so on this slide, Virginia talked through many of these. I'll just go through them quickly. There are a few dependencies that span each university, and you'll need to consider before moving into implementation. The first and most important is obviously the board approval to proceed. After that would be the implementation approach you choose to follow, and if that's something that you'll implement fully on your own, or if there may be a need for some additional support. The next one down is resources and funding. Those are two common ones and definitely consideration at each of the universities here. Next one down relates to human resources support for this transformation. So I think that each university, you'll want to have the HR organization ready to partner in that change and support the organizational change that may be needed. So we listed it as a dependency here. Before you move into implementation, you want to make sure that all of those relationships are established and that the tools are in place that are needed. And then the final two relate to technology. The first is just acknowledging if you do make a change to process, if you make a change to organization, there could be a related technology change that would be needed. So you need some systems expertise there. And then the final one is an IT governance structure. And for the opportunities that Shomik was identifying, it would be ideal to first have that group in place to provide their input and shape those opportunities as they move forward. So before walking through this roadmap, which is the slide that you see here and is also on the board website, we did take into account the constraints that I just talked through. And we also met with folks at the universities and also Board of Regents staff to discuss the initial sequencing that you see here. And what's represented on this page represents our thoughts and the input that we received. We updated to reflect that as well. And then one thing you'll see on here is that the majority of these opportunities, it's suggested that you could implement in a phased or a pilot approach. So you would begin in a certain area and then understand what lessons there are to learn from that before moving forward and expanding the implementation more broadly across the university. So those are some of the other things to mention here. So I'll actually walk through this from top to bottom. So the top lane that you see relates to project management. And this is really the foundation of having a successful program. It provides some of the project management, communications, coordinating some of the overall organizational change support that's needed to oversee, monitor, and communicate program status and success when moving into implementation. And this function will also help to identify and mitigate program risks as they come up. Mark Braun is actually leading the efforts in this area and is in his role as the Transformation Project Manager for TIER. The next row down relates to sourcing and procurement, and this is an opportunity that has been voted on by the board and could begin soon. In the next row, you see the IT opportunities that Shomik talked through, and you can see that as he talked through the opportunities, IT 04 and 03, relating to technology innovations and application landscape, could actually begin first before considering changes to the central and distributed ITS landscape. For finance, we actually had this starting later, probably in 2016 or even 2017. And the reason for that is that there would be a lot of level of effort needed to build and deploy the shared service solution, and also having the HR support in place to partner with those changes, something we think would be worth doing as well. So you'd want to potentially, in the next row down, begin the HR opportunity that we discussed a little sooner, evaluate the need for technology changes, and then build up the organization to support some of the other changes that might be taking place. And then the area below there is actually labeled HR 10. That's the P&S Search Committee one that was voted on by the board a few weeks ago. And then the final two relate to facilities and auxiliaries and student services. All of these opportunities we feel could be implemented by the universities. The facilities one I just spoke through, and if voted upon, could start later this year or early next. And the student services opportunities relating to the RAI and a common application portal are poised to begin soon. So with that, let's move to questions and answers, and I think that Miles is going to help us facilitate.
Right, so yeah, just a reminder that we have a couple of mics here and one at the other side of the room. We are also accepting questions submitted online, and I'll be reading those off, alternating those in with the audience question and answer as well. Also one reminder to the media that are here, we are going to have a media availability right at the conclusion of the audience Q&A. So if you don't mind just holding your questions until that time, there'll be plenty of time after the audience Q&A for media to engage with the consultants directly and ask questions. So with that being said, we are now ready to open up the mics to any questions that the audience may have.
I'm rather concerned that it sounds like you didn't talk to faculty about how we actually use our computers on this campus. Most of us take our laptops to every class we teach because the classrooms are not adequately smart to manage without them. And so part of your cost would be that every single campus on this, or every single classroom on this campus would have to be updated. It would have to be maintained and secured so that we could operate without our laptops. Also, most of us who are faculty do teaching activities from home, which means that we need access to our laptops at 9 o'clock at night or at 6 o'clock in the morning. We also take our laptops on the road to do research. I cannot imagine my department operating without laptops, and I really am concerned that you haven't thought about the faculty perspective here.
Let me answer that. Hopefully you can hear me. What we did was we talked to the different distributed teams and we collected some detailed data. That said, what I will headline is that we are not suggesting any changes to laptops at all. So if we have misconstrued that, our bad. We're talking about desktop computers. So these are desktop computers that are basically those computers that sit on those desks that are not mobile devices. And so we are not, let me be very clear, we're not talking about any changes to laptop devices or mobile devices at all. We're talking about changes to those static Windows desktop devices that basically sit on these desks, and we're proposing that just some proportion of them could be modified and changed to these newer devices that are actually the next generation of computing technology. They utilize something called cloud computing, but they look and feel and they act essentially the same. for most classes of users, and they provide some cost efficiency. So, if you said laptops somewhere, our bad, but you're more focused on the desktop computers. Hopefully that will allay your concerns out there.
I'm Tim Bigelow from College of Engineering, Faculty Center there. I am relieved to hear, if I'm understanding your presentation correctly, that the thin clients are not intended for computations that are done in College of Engineering. When I brought this concern to my department, they basically said in no uncertain terms that thin clients would never work for the type of computation that we need for our research and, more importantly, for our teaching. So I'm hoping I'm understanding that correctly. However, I still have some concern on, one, the printing. I feel like the printing didn't seem to take into account faculty and staff time. Most of the, specifically I'm thinking advising staff and faculty, if you just roughly say $1 a minute, if we have to walk 5-10 minutes to pick up our printout and then come back to our offices, that quickly eats away any cost savings. And of course you get into other privacy issues, especially in the advising staff. They have to kick the student out, lock the door, go get, it seems very, very inefficient. And so my concern, of course, is that printing doesn't seem to work for us, but was faculty and staff time taken into account for these other savings? So that's one question. The other question I had relates to centralized services. Specifically, a few years back, there was a move to centralize data storage on campus. And so in engineering, especially electrical and computer engineering, we had a server that was used to store many of our files. And there was a move to move that to central. Well, when it got moved to central, the cost that central campus was charging our department went up. In fact, it was much cheaper to purchase new servers and build back our server farm than it was to go with the centralized model. So my concern is we centralize again or more, our cost of the departments is going up. And since we have the RMM model, many of these costs gets translated back to the departments, and any cost of the department will then impact or negatively impact our ability to provide services or to have improved technology because it comes out of the same bucket, if you will. I'm on that committee there. And so that's of course a concern as well. So if you have any comments on those concerns, it'd be appreciated.
Yes, those are excellent questions. I think they kind of show that you have a detailed understanding of that landscape. I certainly appreciate that as well. Talking about printers first, certainly we are well aware that, for example, like advising staff, for example, they are on those printers, all day long, and they're utilizing that. Certainly, we are not proposing that all of the local printers will go away. However, what we are suggesting is that there would be a view to look at the location of some of those network printers to say, in some cases, maybe you can take, say, 7 or 8 of those local printers and pool those network printers relatively close to the users as well. And there are lots of efficiencies with that. And basically, if you look at it, the most expensive liquid that you can buy is printer toner. For one gallon of printer toner, you can buy 3,000 gallons of gas. So that's what we're essentially talking about in respects here. But there needs to be a very a detailed design to say, who are the printers, what's the usage, and how can we optimize that. So any design will have to move forward with that. That said, we do not anticipate that all of the 100% of the local printers will go away. What we're anticipating is that and part of this is also as users get more comfortable with these network printers as well, they get comfortable with walking maybe a few paces and getting some of the printer paper that they have. There are some things like, for example, store and print, which take care of some of those security features as well. So we certainly understand that there is a lot of concern here. However, we have been very conservative with the business case, but we do think that there is a potential that as users get more comfortable with that printing, there is potentially a move from, say, local to network printers. That's. Sorry.
If I could just add one thing to that about the printing. All of the print usage is going to have to be inventoried and looked at. And if you remember on the implementation chart, there was a light blue bar that was titled Detailed Solution Design. And in that time, on that bar, is time to go get the full inventory of all the printers applied, identify the people that it would be absolutely disruptive to doing their work if this was a change, and put them out of scope and say, we're not going to touch those, and identify exactly what the real count is. Then when you get the count and where it is, then you decide, how do you implement? Do you do this by department? Do you do it in what sort of sequence? All of that would need to be planned out, and that's what we have time in the plan. No detail developed on that because there's no decision to go down that road, but that is in place to go think through that level of detail. So I'm sure it feels frustrating to hear about these, and hopefully you're not interpreting them as they're being done deals, because it's not. These are just indicative, knowing more planning needs to be done, and it just doesn't make sense to go invest in all that planning if you're only just thinking about the idea at this point, right?
And also mention with the printing piece as well, the thing that we talked about, duplex printing is a simple thing that through just some change of behavior, there's significant savings to be got. But moving to your second question on centralization services, again, a thoughtful question. I know that because of the way the services are charged sometimes, there is an additional cost that is added because there has to be services that are charged. So our business cases are basically looked at the entire system as basically one, that if you had the entire system and you looked at the costs, would you have some efficiencies over the long term? Now, obviously, I fully understand that in the design process, we do know that potentially it looks like there would be some cost efficiencies, but that needs to be passed on to the colleges and the departments. So what will be critical, and for you in particular to keep that question strident, because the pricing of these services will have to follow the efficiencies that are going to come from that as well. So there needs to be something that the departments and the colleges see as well. So we've looked at the whole system, and we do see efficiencies. We certainly think that some of the pricing will have to reflect that longer term too.
Hi, I'm Veronica Dark, past president of the Faculty Senate, and I want to thank you for the very informative presentation. Many of my concerns have been allayed. However, the IT cases for more centralization focused on basically what I'm going to call the general institutional functioning. My concern is about IT in education. Last year, ISU had a very thorough campus-wide evaluation of information technology and the educational mission. And it was very clear from that faculty felt their delivery of the educational mission was enhanced with local services, not centralized services. And so, did you take that into account? Did you have that report? Did you take it into account when you developed this business model? And am I right to be concerned that movement for the institutional infrastructure, IT infrastructure, might force changes on the educational IT infrastructure that would negatively impact the core educational mission of ISU?
Yes, again, I think that's a critical question. So certainly, as we looked at, say, classroom services and the impact of technology on the educational mission, we took that into key consideration, because what we're really suggesting, for example, core infrastructure services like, say, network services or, say, primary data centers are centralized today, and by and large, the reaction seems to be positive. So we are suggesting, similar things like that for, say, catering and feeding of, say, servers, and catering and feeding of, say, desktop devices, things like that. But classroom services, in all of those, we certainly do understand that they're best left local, because you have the response time, you have the localization there. We've also recognized that things like, say, proprietary applications and, say, business requirements should be left where they are. So that's why when we said, we're talking about in the theme of looking at efficiencies where possible, we're talking about some of those core infrastructure services. However, a large number of the local services we still think belong where they are today. That being said, there are probably some enhancements of process, policy, and tools that can still benefit all of these different tools, so different teams. So in some cases, we found different help desk tools. Some, maybe enhancing the level of those tools can increase the level of services there. In some cases, we didn't quite find that there was reporting on the service levels within the distributed teams, and we think that that is an efficiency as well that a lot of the teams can imbibe.
Okay, just one follow-up, just because, so your suggestion is that faculty in delivering their educational mission, or in meeting their educational mission, we should be using the same software, the same?
No. You're talking about the learning management
I'm just
software?
talking about faculty who are working with students.
No. We're not talking about using the same software. But for instance, if there are people, if there's a model who's basically supporting, say, your desktop computers, there is more of a case to have a little bit more commonality with the processes that support you, across the different campus. However, classroom support, for example, all of that will remain local as well. So it should not really have an impact. The kinds of recommendations we are making should really seek to enhance those processes over time.
So I do have a few questions that have been submitted online. What I will do is I'll have those questions and the answers to those questions posted on our institutional tier website, just in the interest of time, because I see we have a number of questions still remaining in the audience. So next question up.
My concern is with the elimination of positions, not only through attrition, but the possibility of layoffs. Over the past 5 years, support staff has been cut drastically because of the budget. And in the meantime, enrollment of students keeps rising. I'd like to know, how does your plan take those realities into account?
Sure, I'd be happy to address that, and then Rick, if there's anything you'd like to add, feel free. Thank you for your question. I think that's something that's probably on the minds of a lot of people in the room and online today, so I'm glad that you brought that up. As I said at the beginning, we realized that any time we talk about staff and attrition or phased retirement, that raises a lot of concern, and it's a very sensitive subject. So I'm glad this came up. I think we should just talk about it head on. So first off, any of the areas where we've talked about any fewer staff being needed to support different kinds of processes are estimates at this point. So I want to make that clear, that that is something that would require very close work with human resources at each university to understand the levels of attrition that are expected in different departments and in different areas, and what kind of skill gaps could occur because of that. Also looking at the same types of considerations with retirement. So all of those pieces need to be thought through very carefully in any kind of implementation. The second thing that I would say is that there is a need to, right now the estimates that we have done are based on the current student population and the work that's being done currently. So there's two pieces to that. One is that any change in staffing levels would only be prompted by changes of work and technology to enable some of the processing that gets done in these transactions we're talking about. So we didn't go in and say, we think you can reduce staff by X, and then let's see what happens. We looked at the way that work could get done in and ways to better provide that work so that it can be simplified, so that it doesn't require as many people down the line using that natural attrition. So when we looked at the work and ways that work could change based on process changes or technology, then we estimated what that could mean in terms of using attrition or retirement to address any staff changes. The other thing that came up is you asked about changes in enrollment over time. ISU is a university that's growing. You expect your enrollment to potentially increase. And through all these business cases, there would need to be, these are not stagnant. These are not something where you do an analysis and set that analysis in time and make changes based on that, because we recognize that your environment's constantly changing, and that any of the analysis where we currently have an idea of how this could unfold in the immediate future or in the short term would have to be re-baselined over time as your enrollment changes and as the needs of campus change. So this is a process of transformation that is constantly evolving and is something that would need to just be built into any considerations around increased enrollment. So thank you for your question.
I'm Gianfranco Ciardo, Chair of Computer Science. So a common theme about your proposal is centralization, of course, which is not surprising because that's how you achieve efficiency. But my experience, both in industry and in universities I work to, is that the further a service provider is from the department, the more potential for slow service, bad service, and that's just human nature, corporate nature. So then you brought up the idea of service level agreements, and SLA are a great way to improve things, but out in the world, if AT&T doesn't provide uninterrupted service, FCC will fine them. If Domino doesn't bring the pizza within 30 minutes, the pizza is free. But instead, you only mention measuring the service. I guess the question I have is, we have now centralized entities providing services, and as far as I know, there is no SLA in place, and there's certainly no measurement in place. So how do you envision having an SLA in place? And even more so, do you have experience in other university having instituted an SLA, and how is that enforced?
A good question. I mean, certainly if you look at, say, help desk metrics, centrally you do get some reporting on the internet on these metrics, what the mean time to resolution is, et cetera. You'll find that on the internet. That said, should we look at a few more SLAs? Yes, certainly we should, in the types of services that we are talking about. We would not say that drown yourself in SLAs, but have the right 7 or 10. Like, for example, mean time to repair is a key SLA that one should certainly follow through for, say, desktop, help desk services and things like that. A lot of universities are using services like those that indicate basically at the average, if you're kind of how your services are. So, is it going to indicate issues with each and every user? No. But over time, as you look at the average, if you're able to bring that down, that indicates the level of services. So we're kind of going from more like a semi-measured process and service here to a more measured, more defined process supported by more consistent process and technology over time. We've seen that if designed and implemented well, it does lead to efficiency and effectiveness.
Sorry, but you again only address the measurement part. What if that measurement shows that the response time is unacceptable? And I'm not talking about IT, actually, I'm talking about in general.
Yeah, I'd be happy to maybe jump in a little bit and answer that, because I think you're absolutely right. It's not just IT, it's across any changes that would occur heading into implementation. And there's probably two things that I would add to that. One is that any types of service level agreements that identify key metrics that you'd want to measure are ones that should be established collaboratively, working with faculty and staff and students to understand what are the things that are important to them. What are the must-have types of turnaround times, or you go into a classroom and something's not working, you need it immediately fixed. And what are those types of things that are critical for performing your educational mission? The other thing is that those service level agreements, where I've seen them be the most successful, is not only developing those collaboratively up front, but also having a regular process to to check in on how well those service level agreements are working, and have a recourse if there are not service levels that are being met, and be able to address those immediately. So you can have a clear escalation path if you're not getting the service that you need or want in certain areas, and then there's also ongoing check-ins and collaboration to tweak service levels as needed and to make sure that the levels that you expected are being obtained, and also to update as needed with changes in the types of services that are provided. Yep.
Okay, so we've got time for one more question over here.
Hello, I'm Andy Bach. I'm president of AFSCME Local 96, which represents the clerical employees at Iowa State. I've heard many comments already, or the questions relate to centralizing. And I am concerned that on this campus, over the last 5 years, with the implementation of the resource management model, many departments have taken on financial processing, invested in training staff to do that effectively. They've chosen to do that because they're responsible for how their funds are spent, and they know that the processing is best done on the local level. I'm wondering if you factored in all that investment over the last 5 years when we're looking at basically going the opposite direction that we have been. Also, if as you do the more detailed analysis, can you describe how the staff that are doing the work and the customers or the faculty, other users in the departments, how they will be involved in doing that detailed work? Thank you.
And maybe I can start with that and others can add on. So I think we heard a lot of what you said with the RMM. Some of the units, departments, colleges all have built some of their own infrastructure, and in many cases it works great. In some cases not as well. So I think that with the look at shared services, one thing that we were trying to point out is that it doesn't necessarily have to mean centralization. It's about redefining the work that's done, looking at the processes, collaboratively building those new processes, and then evaluating where that work should be performed. In many cases, you'll want to have that local support nearby. For some things that are more purely transactional in nature, those may be able to be done a little further from the individual. And I use vague terms because in shared service model, you could have a model that's building specific, you could have a model that's zone of a campus specific, you could have it by floor of building, even depending on transaction volume. So in the next phase is when you have to determine where are all of those local needs that must be met on a local and individual level, and then where are the things that actually can be done on a more, higher level, whether that's on a building-wide or a zone of a campus-wide, that type of thing. And I think that so there is a slide in the presentation, though, that does spell out some of the differences we see between centralization and shared services. So.
Yeah, I think, Andy, the last part of your question was about how would staff be involved. And when I've seen design efforts, as I was saying, in the implementation that would need to move forward if any of these areas are chosen for implementation, I've seen the most success using working groups consisting of faculty, staff, and sometimes students, depending on the areas, people who do the work every day or who are customers who do that work of the people who do that work every day. It's a very collaborative process, and to me, what I've seen be the most effective is where people are designing the future together. We recognize that whoever is affected by this change, this is the work you do every day. And so we feel very strongly that the people who do the work every day should be involved in designing that work. And to me, that means collaboration, it means working groups, it means identifying the staff who do the work and getting them involved in the process.
And this idea, this term of centralization is always a mix. There's nothing going to be totally centralized. There is always going to be a mix, and we have to work with you to identify the right balance. The trick is the balance. And there is no intent to centralize everything in any of these campuses. There just is not. It's to identify those components of work that make sense to bring together and do it in a consolidated location or through a consolidated process. And keep the more really critical components that are needed at a local unit, that need that support, that need the unique understanding, the time response that's needed. We have to draw the balance between those two. It's not easy, and it does require us to work together. We want it to be successful. We would know we have to go through that process.
All right, So that concludes the amount of time we have allocated for the town hall. I just want to offer a special thanks to Regent Milt Dakovich for attending, as well as State Senator Herman Quornbach. We really appreciate your attendance today, and thank all of you for giving us your time and offering your feedback this morning. Your feedback is incredibly important to the TIER project. As a result, everyone will continue to be able to offer feedback in a number of ways. Number one, you could submit written feedback at www.iastate.edu/efficiency. There's a link to the TIER homepage or to the TIER page right off of the institution's homepage. And two, the Board of Regents also welcome feedback on TIER during the regularly scheduled public hearings prior to the October board meeting. The ISU hearing will occur here on campus this Thursday at 4 p.m. in the Oak Room of the MU. That will last from 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. And on October the 23rd, as Dave Noon mentioned, the university presidents will provide additional campus feedback at the Board of Regents meeting in Iowa City. The board will then hold a telephonic meeting on November the 14th to vote on the administrative business cases. So your input, your feedback, your questions are really going to help the regents as they consider each of these administrative business cases. So we really do appreciate any feedback that you can provide. And we will continue to work through our shared governance partners, or with our shared governance partners, to receive that feedback and also filter that or provide that rather to the Board of Regents directly. So number of different ways or modes to communicate with the regents on this. So thank you again for participating, and for the media, there will be time provided up front here to engage directly with Deloitte. Thanks.